looking at this during the meeting, I'm not checking my email, I'm trying to learn more about adjusting my hearing aid.
Speaking of the devil, there he is.
Oh, great, I just texted you, I was like, oh,
Your phone and
I
your.
was paranoid if I emailed you or not. Okay, great.
I mean, I've only had them once.
Mike?
Good. Sorry, I took all of the copies. I took copies of the other. Could I have a copy of?
What? I'm gonna call the meeting to order because everybody's, five of us are present here. John Sasso's on the line and Ron Assini said he was gonna be on at 7 o'clock. Okay, so the first order of business before we do the, can somebody take minutes until Ron comes?
Want me to do it?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
It's probably easier.
I didn't even stare at you either. I was like, okay. Okay, so, do the attendance, John Parsons?
Here.
Norm Bucko?
Here.
Michael Piltman?
Here.
Mark Doxer?
Here.
John Sasso?
Present.
And John O'Neill present. Okay. Entertain a motion to accept the July the minutes of the July meeting.
So moved.
Second. Any additions, corrections, deletions?
I wasn't here, so I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay. None, then we'll do the roll call to approve them. You can abstain if you want, but I'll call on you first. John?
In favor.
Okay. Seeing none. Nora?
Approved. Yes.
Michael? Approved. Mark?
Approved.
John Sasso?
Approve.
John O'Neill approved. Okay. So then we have do we want to do the updates? Or do we want to do the feasibility study? That's what I thought they were the other way around, and I was going to suggest that we do the feasibility study first, so.
Sure, so we are hoping to issue an RFP into the community. We got some guidance and feedback from an outside consultant, a gentleman who came to make the initial presentation all about senior centers. We asked him a few questions. Council on Aging weighed in on a few areas, and I think that the town has it just about ready to go out and to issue it, see what responses we get. The goal is to get it out there as soon as we can because the timelines seem a bit longer than we anticipated, which is kind of too bad. But those are only guidelines. They may be able to adjust that. We'll see. The goal is to get it out there so we encourage as many responses as possible, and then there'll be a committee to approve or to select a selection committee. And then off we go, I hope.
Is it out for 30 days, kind of thing?
Is it 2 weeks or 30 days? Whatever the minimum requirement is, it has to be out there for that amount of time. And you know, one of the questions we asked this other consultant was, with some of the wording we were using, do we think we'd get a number of responses? The answer was yes. So that's what we wanted to make sure of.
Was the estimated timeline in the Chronicle on target as far as maybe it'd be November before selection?
So I think it would be September, it'd be issued early September, which is kind of next week. And whatever the required period is, go through the selection committee and then sign somebody up.
Oh, really?
So as fast as that can happen. That happens.
Then they also stated people had 10 to 15 months.
So there are 3 phases in the study. And if they were to go through all 3 phases, if you add up what the kind of the minimums and the maximums are, that's the timeline that it could be for all 3 phases. But you know, initially phase 1 is what's being contracted for. The money that is indicated in the proposal relates to the amount of money that was allocated from ARPA funds that's still available at this point. And we need to get it moving. It needs to get out the door. I think that it'll be good to see what these folks come back to us with.
Yeah, I'm interested, how does this relate to the process that's going on in the separate community Simon's Way?
So, as a completely separate activity, the Simon's Way Committee is evaluating what would be some of the best uses for the property on Simon's Way. One of those ideas, and I think Karen Janowski from the Council on Aging is the liaison into there, but one option may be that some of that land or part of a building might in fact be a senior center or community center with dedicated space for seniors age 60 plus. And what they're gonna come back with, we don't know yet. They've just issued a request for information for people to take a look at that space and come back with some proposals in terms of what might happen. As part of the feasibility study that this group would do, they need to evaluate a number of different spaces. It's a narrow number, admittedly. But one of them is the existing senior center. One of them could be part of a building on Simon's Way. There are a couple of other maybe potentials in town, but as we all know, the list is pretty narrow right now, especially with the loss of the Walgreens.
And when we talk about them doing feasibility, what's their criteria for something that's feasible?
So they're gonna come back with options, sites and options, what could be done at this location.
This location.
Right, and part of that also is based on everything we've already done and are giving to them. Any additional information that they would suggest bringing, they need to have a lot of experience in working in this specific area. They would then come back and ideally say, here are some options to look at and here's our recommendation. And then there'll be a lot of discussion in the process, a lot of open meetings in the process, but then at some point it comes back to the select board to kind of decide what should be taken forward to the community. So there'll be a lot of discussion before anything like that happens.
I'm still not clear as far as the Simon's Way committee. What's their timeline? Because now this could be up to a year out for the feasibility study around a senior/community center.
So the phase one is not. The phase one is much faster than that. That's just a few months.
So maybe it'd be helpful if you broke down what the phases are.
So offhand, I can't tell you. We're gonna have to go look it up.
I
Here,
read
you
it, but I
need it.
forgot.
Yeah, I didn't see paper breaking it down.
I think I can share my screen too.
Yeah, so first in phase one, design will prepare a facilities program study using the information from UMass, potentially additional input. Phase two, designer completes a feasibility study investigating multiple options to a high level of detail to arrive at a preferred option based on the program, needs and interests identified and selected in phase one. And from a timeline, and then the phase three is completing schematic drawings, high level specifications and cost estimates for the preferred option. The timeline as suggested, so it's advertised in the Chronicle September 6th and the Central Register September 13th, RFQ on the website September 20th, project briefing facility tour October 3rd, last day for questions October 12th. Respondent shortlisted November 2, execute a contract November 27th. And the timeline expectation.
Hey, can I interrupt for a minute?
Sure.
Sorry, I'm actually in a place where I can talk and think for a minute, so I just want to make sure I have because I had a couple quick questions on this, and I just want to make sure I understood. I thought I heard you said that the RFP going out at the moment is solely for phase one. Is that correct?
No, it's for all three phases, but then they're going to work on phase one, and upon successful completion, we move to phases 2 and 3, but we have the right to, if it isn't going as we want, to make changes.
How is it
Okay,
priced?
so
I'm sorry. Yeah.
so the award is for all three phases to start with an NTE of 250K?
With a net cost not to exceed 250K for all three phases.
Okay. And so phase one is actually work that you're asking the whatever company would get awarded this to do. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. No, I have to say I read that phase one and I was a little perplexed in the sense that much of what we've done over the last year and a half, and even continuing, is really aligned with that actual activity. So I was just curious what you actually felt the work that they would be doing, because it almost was like they're going to go back out and do surveys, and it talked about further engagement and further assessment. And I'm not saying that isn't right. I'm just trying to make sure I understand, is that truly what the phase one is? Because it to some extent, it seems like it's a bit, maybe not duplicative, but certainly covering, a fair amount of what we've done over the last year and a half, coupled with what we still continue to plan to do at this point.
Absolutely.
So if
I completely
if
agree.
I'm reading that wrong, please help me understand that.
No, you're absolutely right. And the way that it's worded is that they prepare a facilities program study using the information developed by Recalc and the UMass study and potentially additional input. And we also have talked about looking much more specifically at the needs of young seniors and trying to incorporate into that. And more specifically also, an interest in needs analysis should include intergenerational programming. So
Yeah, I did see that.
that is
Yep.
for a firm that is really well versed in this and has done this for multiple communities should have a lot to be able to bring to the table quickly without a whole lot of work to be able to add to what we've done. And that's why that's a short
Okay.
phase. And then they go
Okay.
right into phase
All right.
two. And phase two is a feasibility study investigating multiple options to a high level of detail to
Right.
arrive at the preferred option.
Yeah, and that's what I felt and thought that was really going to be the focus of their effort, to do that assessment and then present back to us options, and to your point, come up with good criteria for assessment. I'm going to actually go on to mute, let you guys keep talking. I just wanted to make sure I got those questions in. So if I'm still here listening. Thank you.
Thanks. Let me just add one thing too. The last piece related to cost again. The fee for the services related to the completion of these services, phases 1, 2, and 3, will be negotiated but will not exceed $250K. Quote unquote extra services fees will not be allowed for phases 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah, I did read that.
So they're going to have to budget their time accordingly also.
And in the phase two where it talks about, I think high levels used twice. There's something that high level of detail and then at a high level. And
Well, so in the
I think
overview, it only says high level once.
Okay.
Is there another place where it says
The
it?
third
maybe not,
phase, I
maybe
thought.
it's somewhere else. But when you're talking about a high level of detail, you're actually talking about a lot of detail.
Yes,
It's not high level detail.
much detail.
That's what I'm after. And I was like,
Lots of detail. Yes, not, we're only going to look at the top
from the
level.
38,000
Yeah.
foot.
Yeah, it's a building with X thousand square feet would not be a high level of detail.
And the other,
You might rephrase that. I don't
right,
know.
and the other much detail was, I think, on the architectural design
Right.
that would follow. That's supposed to be also
So phase 3.
detailed.
Right.
But you're
I
right.
think, I just was reading it fast and I just like,
Yeah, high level usually
Detail.
means, yeah, you're just looking at the broader scope.
no, this is fine.
Yeah, we're requiring a lot of detail. That's the point. Enough that we can evaluate, we the community can evaluate what makes the most sense. We have a pretty good idea of what's going on. It's not a schematic drawing, it's not a bid, a quote that a construction company would come back with. But it should be able to give us a pretty good idea of what's going on. If you consider what we got already, it's more detailed than that. I'm gonna be careful with my words.
So, for instance, the senior center, the Pleasant Street Center, would these folks be able to say, yes, it would be feasible to double the square footage of that center, do parking and change the entrance and things like that?
So I think they're gonna come back with a proposal in terms of what to do. What it would involve specifically, like moving the entrance, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. That would be for them to kind of come back with. However, in the process, there'll be time to be talking about what's our expectation, or, hey, thanks for the drawing, but we need this to be you know, one of the goals here is to let them kind of come back with what makes sense from a design perspective. And then we
Right.
need to give them more about
Right.
where we're concerned.
No, and I'm coming from, you know, the two groups I'm on, transportation and programs. And transportation is sort of like, well, yeah, you could do things with the senior center. You should probably change the way the entrance is and how the van arrives and drops off people and how people enter from the parking area and other things like that. And I was just curious whether that's gonna be something that they'll, at a high level of detail, talk about it.
So I think that our working groups are meant to add more information to them. So definitely transportation, definitely programs, financing, maybe not.
Right.
Or maybe. But yeah, absolutely. So the reason kind of this next phase of recalc has to come to these folks also. In terms of
But,
saying, here's what we're doing.
and in terms of the financing, would they be able to say, this is, you know, a rough estimate of what this kind of activity would cost? So if you put a building in Simon's Way, it's gonna cost.
Yeah, so I think remember the last proposals that we got, kind of those first, so they had very rough order of magnitude
Right.
cost estimates. So I would anticipate that this would be
Same
a
sort
little
of
bit more
thing.
detailed,
Yep.
but not construction, not bid
not
construction. And in this phase, in phase 3, that's the exact requirement, is to actually come back with the right words.
Okay.
Complete schematic design plans, high-level specifications and cost estimates. So that maybe that's the high level. So, yeah, so it's not a bid, but it's all but. And
So-
this is parallel to the school plan, by the way, in terms of kind of picking the space, then going through and getting options, selecting an option, and then going and getting architectural drawings.
And then construction.
And then construction, you've got to do too if you want to have a building, yes.
And, are we telling them what sites to consider in this?
Yes, specifically.
So definitely Pleasant Street Center. So specifically on page 1, a potential project may include a renovation and addition of the existing Pleasant Street Center building or construction of a new building which may be on an alternate site. So
Okay,
that's
yeah,
page 1.
And we haven't identified those alternate sites. Simon's Way,
And so I think we will. I think we'll tell them the ones we know. I would hope that they poke around a little bit, but you know, we've done a lot of the poking already. And it just,
Do we actually think there's more than two possibilities?
Right.
well, so, I mean, at one point, I think that there was a possibility of the RMLD building,
Right,
but that doesn't seem to be in the cards.
Oakland Road,
Oakland Road conceivably,
but that's really, given what's there, and the ledge and the way the properties.
but we already know,
building,
No, but
right?
we know that though, I mean, so.
but we know that, and we already had a proposal for putting not a preschool, what's the word I want? Early childhood education center there. So we already have estimates of what it would take to deal with the
Well, they had that on
ledge.
the table,
10 years ago.
numbers, yeah, before
Absolutely.
town meeting and everything, and that,
I think they pulled it back. I don't think town meeting voted on that.
didn't vote, but we got the information on it.
Again, I want them to have the ability to see what's possible, come back to us with recommendations on what options make sense. Let us do some tweaking. They'll have a preferred option. We're gonna talk about what seems to make sense and what we wanna go forward with.
Could I ask a question on Simon's Way? Somebody told me that the ball field is really very much underutilized and that might be up for grabs. Is there any truth to that statement?
I saw that, but I don't believe that's the
Yeah, you can
case.
get it directly. But the reality of what's going on with Simon's Way, if I understand it correctly, is to kind of evaluate that whole area for what might be the best possible usages, right? And there could be all sorts of different pieces. They could reconfigure that field, I heard, as one idea. There's all sorts of discussion about the parking lot at the rink. The goal is before starting to carve it up into pieces and then finding out that, oh, damn, if we hadn't done that, we would have had another great option. Is to kind of see what the options might
So
look
it's
like.
gonna take the whole area, including the ball field.
It's considered, my understanding is it's considering, is that my understanding, right?
Yes.
Because that's a
Yes.
soccer field, not just baseball.
Correct, yep, multi-use for soccer,
Yeah.
high
Coach
school,
there,
youth
referee.
organization.
There's all sorts of stuff. And we had the town survey that was done and talked a lot about recreational usages,
So
so.
that came out of that other committee of Simon's Way.
Yeah.
One of the people on the committee said, oh, that's where the underutilization came in, Joe. That was a quote.
I got it from a pickleball.
I think it was a pickleball guy who quoted it.
Whatever it is, don't worry about it.
Never say that. It's ridiculous.
I didn't hear that.
I think that the goal of this group is to be able to look at potential sites, and every site has blemishes, we already know that, right? If we said only unblemished sites are possible, we can stop right now.
But in Simon's Way has,
Oh,
I
Simon's
mean,
Way.
aside from the ball field and the parking lot, it still has the 2.7 acres of the Zany land, right?
Right, in Zani land, yeah. And, you know, there are, I'm sure we'll find that there are some things that we have to mitigate and figure out what's possible. But they took the 2.7 acres, they've already figured out what area is conservation or wet, it can't be built on. There's some potential space.
It was even smaller, yeah.
So, but that was one of the reasons why the committee asked to increase their scope from just that Zani land to the entire area, so to really evaluate what's going on, and, you know, to see maybe there are partnerships that are possible, maybe there are ideas that people will have based on, you know, oh, that's the perfect shape for such and such. Who knows? They've issued the RFI, request for information now, and hopefully some people will come in with some ideas, and we'll see what happens from that. But I think to your point, John, the timing of things
Yeah.
is now getting really critical again.
Also timing of when this committee sunsets.
Get to that one too.
Okay.
But I think for now, I think one of the things that we should do is accomplish what we talked about doing. Use that to give the information to whoever is selected to do this work. Right? And I completely agree with everybody that, you know, stuff that's done doesn't need to be redone. But I want the expertise of these folks who build these centers on a regular basis and hopefully have a nice track record to be able to give us some input or insight. I don't want them to say, throw out everything you have. We have a ton, and this group has done a ton. Awesome. And hopefully that means that they look at this and say, we're fully briefed, we get it, rock on to phase 2. Because they only have a certain amount of money to spend, depending on where the quotes go. That's where it goes. To me, getting this thing out the door is critical. And getting going. Right, we've been talking about this for months, I wanna get it done.
I won't belabor it, but it would have been nice if that was sent out. The information about the RFP.
We did talk
It
about
is.
it, right, in the last meeting?
Why would I didn't know where it was at. Thank goodness the Council on Aging was on top of it. But no, I didn't see it.
So, folks, I have to say, you know, it's been discussed at a couple of one select board meeting, 2 council on aging meetings. You know, it's in the public eye, and
Come on.
Yeah, but it would have been nice.
And this
to
is
get it.
recalc and you're charging us with all these things and we went, you know, we didn't get the opportunity to weigh in. We didn't get the information.
It hasn't been sent out yet either, so there's still, you know, we sent it out last week, so there's opportunity for everyone to weigh in now too, before it gets sent out as well,
I
right?
just would encourage folks not to,
But who
Take our eye
knew
off
it was
the
sent out and it was, you know, what was it sent out
not to take our eye off.
Yeah,
The heavy work is gonna be done in what this firm brings to us. That's the heavy lifting. That's what we want. Mind you, I would have loved to send this out months ago.
No, I just, at our last meeting, I'll promise you this will be the last thing. We talked about that a timeline in which in August, it would probably go out sometime in August. And within 30 days, and then the next thing I know, I read in the newspaper, you know, a completely different timeline. Without anything between our last meeting in reading that things had completely changed. So,
I think it's the reality of issuing an RFP and complying with the legal issues.
Yeah, and the COA just got it
It's
a
called
few
communication.
weeks ago
It's
too,
called- it's
at
called
their last
communication.
meeting. So it wasn't like we, you know,
But they
I
got it
didn't
in-
purposely send it out to you, it's, I
They-
sent
they
it out
asked
because
for
it
it.
was their meeting too.
And actually,
they
that's
asked for
twice
it,
in the
yeah.
timeframe as a result of
But
wanting to wait.
You're a representative from the select board.
John, I can't give everything to everybody every single time, nor can anybody. Every committee deals with this. The Council on Aging jumped on it. Recalc didn't. But you were aware of what was going on. It's in our minutes.
No, I didn't.
Our minutes.
No, the minutes had a different timeline, and as far as I was concerned, I didn't know there was gonna be any time for input.
The RFP is, well, initially, it was the town was designating it and getting it out the door.
Right. And that was the last
That's the
we were
typical
informed.
process.
That was the last that we were informed.
And it seems to me when Council on Aging responded, we had to do it quickly because there was a time restraint on how much time we had to get our input in.
To get an issue to meet this timeline.
Okay.
And it's way behind where we had all hoped. It takes a lot longer than I guess I anticipated. It sounds like everybody else too.
All right, any other questions, comments? All right, the updates from each working group. I think the program committee, Michael, Nora, and I had a conversation, so it was only three, went on for a while, because they had some concerns about what their role was. So if you want to, and John didn't participate, but you said something to me before this meeting. So I think everybody was on the same wavelength.
Yeah, I didn't think all three of us had a, a voice. Well, I didn't think all three of us had to ask the question.
So why don't you?
So, I think we're confused as to what we're really trying to accomplish, because we've gone through programs, talked to Chris, Senior Center, and there's lists of programs and all that stuff. We've come up with a list of questions that you could ask, but it seems redundant on top of redundancy to do some of this stuff. And we've been down this path, and if you want, we could say, these are sort of when you're thinking about a physical layout, if you can have this space, and this space, you're better off. And if you can have this space, this space, this space, and this space, you're better off. You can do more program. But it's at the end of the day, whatever space you get, you're gonna fill up. You will in fact do whatever. If you don't get a good industrial kitchen, you're not gonna do cooking things. Would they be popular programs? I guarantee so. So we're sort of at a loss as to what are we really trying to do, and how do we feed the RFQ people, or what we've already done, which covers a lot of this stuff, some detail.
If I were
Fairly
gonna say
low
something,
level.
I'm sorry. I thought you were. If I were gonna say something on it, my question would be, what are we supposed to do that Recalc hasn't done, that Council on Aging hasn't done, and that UMass hasn't done?
And that
What
Chris
else?
doesn't do every day.
Pardon me?
So that I think is where we got to, and is that fair?
That's what you presented to me, yes, and I try to come at it from what my understanding is that we were looking at not only things for like people who don't now go, what will be the attraction? What's some of the things that other places have that people from Reading as well as that are very popular you know, and maybe some of, well, finance will be getting at, but there's some things for when they charge or not charge and those kinds of things. Younger seniors, you know, have people done nighttime programs, weekend, so I thought those are some of the areas that we had talked about. Okay, so that's what I had indicated, but people still, by the end of the half hour, people were still, this is really bad.
So if you're asking my opinion, I think what you said is pretty spot on. It's adding to what information we already have. So more specifically on what programs are most popular with younger age 60+ seniors. What have you tried? What's worked? What's failed? Do you offer unique programming that users from other centers come to you for? What are those programs? How do you control who can come to them? You talked about charging for activities, evening activities. Who does it? How do they do it? I chatted today with Brian Snell, whose name you guys may remember. And he was telling me, there were a lot of these things were going on way pre-COVID or several years pre-COVID, and have ceased. What's going on. So I think that if we look back, we could find some answers. I think it's time to challenge those answers a little bit. I think the world has changed. I think the requirements are different.
But also, I think the Council on Aging is different. I think it's far more at least from my vantage point, it's more active, more engaged, which is great. And so my concern has been on the program side. It's just me now. That's not these people. Is that the Council on Aging is the main place on the programming. Can we help them? As opposed to us coming in, I'd like to hear, if, Nancy, wants to speak to it, or Marilyn or whatever, because to me, that's your bailiwick. If we can be helpful, fine, but all right, Marilyn has her hand up.
I'm no longer chair, so Nancy, shush me if I'm out of line. But we're organized differently. In some towns, the Council on Aging, for all intents and purposes, is elder services. And they guide the whole thing, and they're very deeply involved in programming. It's not set up that way in Reading. And I turned to the select board and town meeting for whatever reason they set it up the way it is. We're simply an advisory board to elder services. So we don't determine programming. There are not Council on Aging set programs. There may be special events that we sponsor with our money, but that doesn't mean we are running the programs. It's never been that way, at least not to my knowledge in Reading, and not in the 10 years I've been involved anyway. So it's kind of apples and oranges. It's elder services that drives the programming, and we're there to try to be collaborative advisors on it. And we do have pools of money, thanks to the trust, to help support special things. But it's really apples and oranges between different.
So I would extend my comment to staff then.
Right.
That's
right.
Because I hear what you're saying.
Okay. Okay.
So John, if I could.
Yep.
Let's get high up in altitude for a few minutes here. We're going to put together a recommendation for a new center. We're going to approach the community to support that, and we're going to need money to build it. We're going to need money to run it, and we're going to need to basically, when you use the word justify here, kind of what's going on and why, and that we've done good homework, and we get it. That we're not kind of creating the Taj Mahal, if I could use that term, but we're creating what this community needs for its age 60+ seniors. We need to be as convincing as we possibly can be. The better the information we have, I think the higher the chance of success, and the easier it is to answer questions that, if you thought about this, if you thought about this, if you thought about this, we can say, yeah, absolutely, we have the answers right here.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can I make a comment?
John Sass.
I apologize,
Oh.
I'm listening, I'm not hearing every specific thing, but I get the gist was the question of what is it that we should be doing from a program perspective. I know one of the things we talked about at the last meeting was to not just look at the issues of the current programming, but also what other options might exist. We even talked a little bit about surveying some of the other spaces in the community that might be available and talk about ways in which we could leverage things today, because we're going to have to cross that bridge regardless, whether it's an interim solution or whether it's things that get done even in the future. So I thought that was another dimension to the programming group, and I know I had shared some feedback on that with Michael. I don't know if Michael followed up with Mr. Terry on that potential subject, but I know that was one of the items we talked about last week. We also talked last month. We also talked, I would say, in detail about that very question of what is it that we really want the programming team to be doing. And I think we got into a lot of back and forth over, you know, we don't want to duplicate what staff has already done, but we do want to really take a more in-depth look at, you know, what some of the impacts of those programs, if we flush them out more fully, how do they impact what a center might look like, and to what extent they may limit our ability to run a program today, or even in the short term. So again, I'm going to drop off right now, but I didn't want to leave that conversation without reminding us that we did talk about that last time.
We did talk to Mike Terry. He was in. And I think, I mean, there are a number of organizations in town that run lots of programs. Like there's the rec group, there's the Y, there's libraries,
Churches, yeah.
churches, private groups, so all the private groups going on it. And you know, as a social gathering, Cafe Nero does a lot of what goes on in the senior center that I went to, Melrose. It functions just like their coffee room, as far as I can tell. The cost is a little different.
Good.
So if you want to, if that's what we're supposed to sort of lay out, that, and then there's also lots of private organizations that my wife does pottery and arts, all sorts of stuff.
So I think these questions relate to, so what is it that we really prioritize for the center? Knowing that there are some other things going on, maybe other places. But we also know that if your senior center and your senior activities aren't centered, they're distributed into 8 locations. It's a disaster. Nobody knows where to go for what or when.
It's a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Right, that's why it's not
It's
a disaster, it's not a senior center.
Right.
It's a senior dispersion.
Well, to me, that's why, you know, the interim, see, and I've never seen that as part of our responsibility, the interim programming.
Right.
I know John disagrees, and that's so noted, but that's a different ball of wax. That definitely should be the staff, you know, at the.
But I do think that.
And I think they are.
Yeah, but some of this comes to what do we want the centralized center?
Right, but totally agree on that, but I think that's a lot of the work that we did do and what UMass came up with. You know, we prioritize, here are the things that, you know, like the exercise, like a food thing, a social place for a social gathering.
Office space.
Right.
Office space.
Storage locations. I mean,
They agree, you know, office space and some of the social space, that's not really programming, that's space that's required, essential to
I agree.
the
Building.
building, but it's not in a programming world.
Well, so there's
It's not
office
a
space,
program.
there's office space and there's private space. So there's programming that can go in a private space. So some of the shine stuff or taxes or things like that, you don't want that out in the open. People want that in a private office so they can have a conversation privately, right?
They do it in the foyer of the library.
Right, but
This
that
is-
is our responsibility.
This
I
is the
think.
stuff that, to some extent, we've already done.
Yes.
Between the studies that we have, so the kind of the general stuff I think is there. I think this is getting much more to the notion of what what's gonna be required to run the center? What what's the stuff you wanna do? How many people are gonna be able to serve? What are the right things to have there versus those that you don't need to?
And how many
if
of
you
those
want-
centers are running nighttime programming, like
Yes.
you mentioned, John, and you mentioned
Yeah,
Mark?
I got pushback when I brought it up to some folks. It was like, it's great, and there's a narrow group of people that are interested.
Maryland is.
Yeah, but, okay,
Oh, you
how
got your
narrow?
hands up, I'm sorry.
50 narrow? Right, is 50 narrow? 50 narrow to me is plenty, I would imagine. I got pushback on excursions and trips. Oh, we don't do that. This was in previous years. They didn't do it anymore because nobody wanted to go. They didn't have enough people who wanted to do it. So I kind of called, I can't say what I called it, but I said, no. I don't think that's right. So if we accept kind
It's
of
so
what it's.
crowded, nobody goes there anymore.
It is pretty.
We know bigger and more, right? We know some of the things, we've done this great information, we've done some surveys, we've got some information, awesome. What is it that we can add to that helps us figuring out how to budget, helps us figure out how to share with the community what it's gonna be, and what support it needs? Because town meeting is gonna require that to make it pass. Without it, it'll get sent back.
I think you're gonna
Ron,
need,
okay, Ron, and then I'll get to Nancy and Marilyn.
so. I would say after hours, to get to the 60+ people who still work, who still wanna go down to a social area, to have time together with people, whether it's playing cards or ballroom dancing or whatever, right? Those after hours gonna need that. And we talked about the space, like, there's a lot of programming that's going on today that they can't run it twice a week. There's not enough space to run it twice a week. So there are things that people wanna sign up for that fill up very quickly, and that's the only time of the week that they do it. So, it's space, right?
Right, but document, is that happening? In other words, they need to say which programs precisely, what was the overflow, I mean, no, really, because I know this is the sort of thing
Yeah.
that people pay attention to, actual data.
Sure.
Okay,
Right, those are the important things that we could ask the other centers, like, hey, Zumba's filled up,
Right.
25 people in our space twice a week. We could probably offer it every single day, but we can't.
Right.
Is Zumba popular where you are? And what's your most popular program? What space do you need? So,
We're not suggesting that current staff isn't doing what they should be
Right,
doing at all.
Yes.
That's not what's going on.
Right.
We're trying to supplement information to be able to say, wow, armed with the bigger space, armed with capabilities,
we could do this.
okay, and we're the ones we want.
Nancy?
I guess I would like to echo what Marilyn said, but also that we did go to the select board and we did, I did read a letter that was approved by all the Council on Aging members. And we saw some real shortcomings in the timeline, the amount of time that is spent on programming, because like a lot of you there, you've mentioned comments, like we've been doing that for the last year and a half. So Council on Aging was saying, compile that information and give it to the consultant. But our problems were with the length of time spent on programming, because as much as you talk about different questions, it's in our view, it's redundant. And we talked about the timeline. The timeline, as John O'Neill was reviewing, goes out a year. I mean, and that's just way too long. The consultant should be jumping right in to doing a look at phase 1, but also should be jumping right into phase 2. We had some real concerns. It's up to the select board on how they want to approach it, but we do not endorse a lot of time spent on researching programming. That is It's in our view, it's a redundant effort. Yes, you're asking new questions, but you can next year ask new questions. You're always going to be asking new questions that you didn't ask the first time around. So let's take the data that we have, let's make our point, and let's move on to the heart of the matter, which is what are we going to do to allow for more space? So I don't know if all of the recalc members saw our letter, but we can send it out to all the recalc members so you can see where.
I need to make a point of order.
Sure, okay.
This isn't what we're discussing right now. We're discussing the programming subcommittee.
That's
and
exactly,
other subcommittees.
Mark, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Work
I'm
groups.
talking
Sorry,
about,
work groups.
I'm talking about programming, and that is one of the Council on Aging's concerns, that we've done that, we've been there, we asked the questions for a year and a half. We went out, or actually Recalc went out and did a lot of review, and we just, don't think that Recalc should be spending a lot of time on doing research. Now, if you guys are a volunteer group, so if that's how you decide to spend your volunteer time, that's up to you. But Council on Aging doesn't feel in the end that the information is going to be a value add. That's all. So Mark, I am talking about
Yeah.
programming.
So points understood.
And I understand.
Both Recalc and the
that-
council are here as advisory groups. And
Exactly.
the advice is appreciated, needed,
Mhm.
but isn't
It's up
necessarily
to the
100%
select board.
followed. Right. So,
It's up to the select board.
right. Our responsibility is gonna be to get a center built, to get the taxpayers in this community and all the intermediate steps to support what we're gonna do here. And that has to be our judgment. That's kind of how it's set. To do that, however, we need lots and lots of input. But again, it doesn't mean that 100% of that input is taken or guided. And you said that and understood.
Yeah.
And
I did say.
appreciate that. That's what we're trying to do. But we're trying to kind of figure out how do we move ahead? How do we get things set up to be able to share with the community the information that they're gonna need to feel that I get it. I think this is responsible. I think it's exactly what we need to do for the community. I'm voting for it. That's how I view the end mission of what we're trying to accomplish. Here, we created subgroups, one to work on programming, and I think hopefully we've talked about kind of what some of those things could be that could really add some value. We also have another one to get to next, which is transportation. We have a third one to get to, which is financing. Actually, the fourth one that exists also relates to kind of what we're all talking about, which is how do we brief whoever we hire in a way that they look at it and say, holy cow, let's go to phase 2. Awesome. Absolutely awesome. The better we do with that, the less time they're gonna spend. They're not getting more money. That's laid out here. And if we get into a situation where they say, geez, you've got a proposal that's gonna cost more money, I think we know where we'll tell them to make a cut. I think that's all cool. I wanna be able to kind of move ahead. And I think where the excitement's gonna be, where the input is gonna be needed after Recalc and the council do their work, is gonna be in looking at different options that come to us. Adding, subtracting things that we think are more important, less important, and get them to deliver to us options that we feel good about, and ideally one that's even preferred for the community. Take from there. That's what we're trying to get to.
So the material that we've collected and presented multiple times, the multiple studies we have, is not enough for this.
So Ron, we just talked about what the differences are on the gaps. So, and you answer the question, if you were a taxpayer and you weren't involved in this as closely as you are, what's it gonna take for you to feel like, hey, they've looked at the right stuff, I get it, and I'm in favor.
But we're doing the feasibility study to do this, right?
So, but we're arming the feasibility study.
And then what I'm saying, you don't think we have enough material to arm the feasibility study?
I think we could, but I think there'd be some gaps. We all talk about age 60 plus, and it's never been, I'm not gonna say it's never been a focus, it hasn't been successful enough.
Yeah, I think it's been revisited so many times, right, a senior center, just, I can kind of speak from experience with the Birch Meadow Master Plan. If I could tell you how many of the same volunteers did the same thing over and over again, you can have Rich Hand come into the next meeting. And things change, right? New questions have to be asked, more creative questions can be asked, and I think the most important thing is that everyone's on the same page and knowing that we have to keep people informed about what's going on first and foremost, and that we're communicating in an effective way to the public and we're giving them all the information they need, because Mark's 100% correct that you're on the town meeting floor, you're gonna get nailed with all these questions, and the community wants answers to all these questions. Hey, here's all the towns we reached out to, here's all the questions we asked, and someone who's doing the feasibility study can take all of that information and put it into a really detailed, comprehensive report within the feasibility study. There's no way we can create a feasibility study on our own without the level of detail that's gonna be provided here. And this level of detail too was also done by Newton, right? A similar report.
Yeah, they actually had even more detail.
Yeah,
Much
so
deeper process.
I think having the backing of a professional designer, like that's the route we went to with the Birch Meadow Master Plan, and that's ended up what got us over the finish line, is having that professional backing. These people do it for a living. You know, they take that data, they analyze it, they take all of the other towns that they've had experiences in and compare it to that. So I think someone will come in and really digest all the information that you guys have put into it.
So I agree, and I'm saying the material that's been put together today, that we've collected for the past 2 years, plus all the studies, are we saying that that's not enough to arm this feasibility study to get started?
I think what Mark is saying is we could probably organize it a little bit better, make sure that we're not missing any holes, and get it in a fashion that's really presentable and workable by this contract.
We have given examples like the Zumba, but we have to say exactly, Zumba is, we can only do it this many times a week. Amanda's, we know we could at least do it twice or 3 times.
And you need 500 square feet minimum.
Right, I mean,
for it.
that's what we need to be able to say,
Some towns
we
charge.
don't have enough space, but exactly
Not right now, because ARPA funds.
what is that preventing
Yeah.
us from doing, not having enough space? This is a question.
You're still stuck in an old building that has a bathroom on the second floor.
Right, no, that's part of it, we know that. No, but we're talking about the programming side, the programming
And
side.
then, and his other pieces also. So
Yes, right.
there's no disagreement from what everyone is saying. We need to give as much, as complete, as detailed information as we possibly can to whoever we're gonna hire, to put them in a position to understand what we're looking for and move ahead as quickly as they can. I don't think there's any disagreement about that, right? We're arguing about, do we need more or less detail, right, left? Okay, I'm happy to suggest to Fidel that we even say something in here that says, we believe that we've got most of this information already collected and hope that you can make phase 1 shorter, something along those lines. Maybe that would address some of the concerns that we're talking about. So it doesn't feel like we're saying that we want you to do all this stuff again. We certainly don't. I'm getting the feeling that that would help just kind of, first of all, it'll break us clear, but I think we're actually not in disagreement, but it isn't clear enough. So let's make it clearer.
Make it clearer, and also going back to the program working group. Do you have a better handle on it? Because there are some questions, and we are gonna be, either us or staff or an intern or whatever is going to be going to a number of different locations and asking not only about the programming, but transportation and financing. Okay, how it works. And so what are the key questions that will help us get concrete data, but for comparison purposes? If we could say, community around the same size elderly population as Reading, X community, and Y community and Z, whatever. This is the space they have, this is the program they were able to do. And here are the things that we can't do, that we would like to do. That we've identified that there's a need, and then we can refer to the UMass study as well, as far as the bigger thing. But to be able to actually say that the calls that we receive, here are the things that we can't do, that we would like to do, because we have called around, because the space limits. I think we have to be very concrete, as much as we can be. What are the actual things that space is limiting it, the center from being able to do? Both more of the same and things that they can't do at all.
Marilyn has.
Marilyn, okay, Marilyn.
Real quick, one point, and I just don't know where it falls in the scheme of everything you're collecting, but I'd broaden the language about programming to also include elder services. My thing for the evening is, just like town hall has an evening when all the services of town hall are available to the public, in part because people work and that's the only time they can get there. What I personally, since I'm sort of the voice of evening stuff, would like to see is an evening, maybe only one evening a month even, where all the services of elder services, just as they are in the daytime, the social worker, the nurse, anything else related to it, are available, because people work, just like town hall. We don't stop needing it when we turn 60. But in addition to programming, so I'm looking for a full service senior center in the evening personally. Just, that's the 2 cents worth. The other is, please, 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 everyone, as soon as you can, take a drive up to North Andover and look at their new senior center. It's a really good way to get a mental image of what is not an unreasonable thing for a reasonable community that's probably a little bit bigger, but not magnificently so than Reading. But we're growing and we'll get there, can decide to do, and their community supported it. And I think it's just good to have a mental image of what it could be, in perhaps our circumstance. And I know it's different. We've got land issues and all the rest, but I just think it's good to have a mental image of what one could do and be aiming for as close as we can get within the constraints of Reading's community.
Thank you.
John, if I could, to your point. Yeah. We do need to kind of construct this list, and that's kind of what we sort of started with the
Right.
programming piece. We wanted to go for the transportation piece, for the finance piece also. I know, I don't know if there are some specific questions transport had. Finance started a little bit.
We came up,
We got some?
Did you?
Yeah,
Yes,
we have
I'm-
it here.
Yep.
Yeah, we came up with about a dozen questions.
Okay, so in what my wife would say in Mark Doxer style, so I came up with 8 questions that cover all 3 areas.
Oh, let's hear them. Total?
But I thought it would be a good starting document, and then people say, yeah, but you didn't do this, so we gotta add that, and you don't need that, you can get that a different way. I thought having kind of a document to pin onto and to add and subtract from might be really helpful.
You should
But
take, yeah.
if you've already got things, let's start with that. Oh, sorry, is that the transport one?
Yeah, I mean, we have some also. When you start adding all these questions up, it gets quite.
In our question.
So the one,
We're with, what would we, this was the understanding that we would be going to other, centers and asking them
Is it one shot,
one shot.
right? Ideally one shot.
All.
For all,
All.
yeah, so.
So I
all
can't
topics.
be.
So I having a, right, so I didn't,
List is the right idea.
right, so I didn't figure that, you know, all 11 of these were gonna be.
Okay, I did it. Transportation's up there now.
So
Awesome.
Sorry,
could the
everyone.
council get it too, just because they're,
They're seeing this, whoever those.
Sharon.
well, two are.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure,
So-
didn't
so
I print it out
speaking
and
of
put
that,
it in the meeting?
Can I get a copy of the council word letter?
Oh, yeah, I haven't seen it.
I thought I
Yes,
printed out the transportation questions, I'm sorry, but,
yes, because.
No, I had those.
Oh,
were-
oh, oh,
that's
oh.
just
well,
mine.
here they are on the screen.
Can you increase the?
Yep. Let me try to do that.
Well, I think there's two ways we could take, take a look at it. I don't know if we wanna take the time now or not, but it's first of all, are there things that are omitted
Oh, sorry.
that we could add? Then the next thing was, what are the ones that then we, but we're not at that stage yet. We don't have all the questions for all the groups. Right, so right now, let's take, what's might be missing? Have you met with the Mystic Valley people yet?
I did, I talked to them today.
Okay, because I wish, because they promised me information that I have not received, so I'm gonna have to get back.
From the director from,
Director, yes, and the program person, yeah.
okay, yeah, touch base. I add a thought, a question.
Sure, oh, yeah.
So, what is the transport structure you have in place now for seniors in your community? Think about going to the senior center, to shopping, to events, special programmed events, et cetera. What are people asking for more of? What would you change if you could?
That's the best part, the last thing you just said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What could you change?
Because the other stuff is pretty much solid at each senior center.
Yeah.
That last question is.
Yeah.
Mark's actually jumping ahead because that would, and consolidate.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I'm
No,
adding,
no,
I'm
right,
adding.
right.
Consolidating all at once.
Well, I think that's why I think John and I would say, because we basically developed the questions.
But these are just more details
Right.
of all of that. So-
Yeah, I think so. So if there's a way, but to John's point, I don't mean to only consolidate, but I thought that some of these things, and maybe it's even just the last point, should be added to
Yeah.
the list.
So did you,
And John, I'm thinking too, so like Burlington has a transportation network for the town, basically. I think it's buses that go around town. I don't even know if it's age restricted. I'd love to hear from them.
I don't think it is, and they do have, they're the ones that have taxi vouchers.
Yeah, so they have all sorts of things that I thought they could.
So Andover's got a ton, so.
I know that Andover's got a new program that
Get
changes.
kids
but-
to school.
Yeah, I spoke with someone today who said, you got 2 vans, when do you do it? Anyway.
Yeah, I didn't get like the,
Well, that's what I was hoping that we would get some of that information from some of these questions, do you have vans? And I'm hoping some of them say, well, we did,
Yeah, we got rid of it.
we got rid of them, and here's what we have instead. That's what we're,
Right,
Yeah.
we're kind of looking for
but,
what's the innovation.
I thought those,
going on.
those last two questions were great, actually, so we certainly would. Be, well,
I mean, this just gets some
Transportation people
more
are-
detail on some of the things that people have identified as issues. Or if you have a local network, how far will you take somebody into Boston? Will you-
could you use all the questions or you're wanna consolidate them, you said?
I think eventually,
Eventually, I'm saying for purposes of tonight and what we need to get done, I would say, let's add on, and then we can consolidate.
because at the end of the day, imagine that community B. So I have a list of questions and it starts, streaming down the pages and you look at them.
I agree.
But is it gonna be a list of questions or is it a conversation?
I think conceivably it's both, but that's a great discussion.
Right, well,
How do you, what's the best way to do it?
because what did we learn from when we went around? I mean, we did have a list, but I referred to it, but basically I had a conversation.
Absolutely.
And any, only exact numbers, that I made sure I wrote down exact numbers of dollars. Other than that, I wanted to be able to follow up on something that they said, that kind of thing. So I think conversation that's guided. Right. Because we want to be consistent with the information.
But it went into a spreadsheet also,
Yes.
that just having lots of conversations, I don't know.
Oh, no, we filled out a form.
Populated it.
Oh, yeah, we put it on a form, and then it went into a spreadsheet, but we need to.
So there has to be a form and a
But when
You know,
spreadsheet.
you have to know what you're trying to figure out.
Right, because some
Before
things
you
they
go into
won't,
the conversation.
they won't give you as answers, some will say we don't know, but, which is fine, I mean, that's gonna happen some
Or
places.
we don't do this.
Yes, yes,
There's
oh,
lots of
yeah,
these
yeah,
things that say,
Oh,
no,
yeah.
we don't do
Apply,
that.
right.
right.
We didn't do Uber, Lyft, never thought about it.
That's why I like something like 9, because it's kind of like, what, any, you know, innovative programs, because then sometimes they take pride in saying, oh, yeah, we have this town-wide thing. Also, I don't, well,
But I liked your general discussion, I think in your, you know, to the center, to shopping, to.
Just to make sure that we're capturing the different things that are
well,
possible.
also, I see, number 2 was for a different purpose, how many participants drive to the center, because this is the whole thing about parking. I thought that was one of the things. Yeah, the person
I
who
don't
presented
know
at the
where they-
library that time, when he said 100 parking spaces, I said, I wouldn't, I.
So, I mean, so this is why it's great to do the benchmarking too. So, Newton, which is a much bigger population they're taking care of. They're utilizing municipal parking, they're counting all that in there, but the number of dedicated spaces is not hundreds by any stretch of the imagination.
Needham's the same way. Needham has 60, but they use a municipal, another lot across the street. Maybe it's even an MBTA lot or something like that they use. And they still say we don't have enough parking.
But
Yeah,
it's a
there's a
perpetual,
amount there.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yep, and that's a community.
Well, you know, that'll be a bigger issue for the 60 plus who still want to drive, right? That don't want to do the public transportation.
Well, I mean, in the issue is if you have a big center that has all sorts of services, it's
Yeah.
gonna,
Yeah, you got more people want to
you're
come,
gonna get more.
but if you have different ways to get people there.
Well, that's why, yeah, that's
If you
the
don't
thing.
offer anything, no one will come, so.
There you go, there's the solution.
And one of the strongest things with Andover's transportation is they've got a much bigger tax write-off program in their town. And therefore, they use those drivers to transport people, so the people not only get money off their taxes, they also get paid mileage. So it's a real good deal.
The driver, the volunteer drivers,
But they're part of the tax work
right,
program.
plan, yeah.
And I think our program has kind of died in this town as far as I know.
And there are definitely people that are using it.
But they're not using it for driving.
So, I mean, great, that's what we want to hear about.
All right, anything else before we move on to the next? Oh, Marilyn's raising her hand. Yes, Marilyn.
Just an FYI, I've been on the work group that's been helping Pear Associates develop the Board of Health Community Health Assessment, and they're looking basically at the social support, social determinants of health in many ways. Anyway, I asked for many questions related to elder experiences being added. I have not seen the final, but one question I asked them to add was, do you still drive? And I think getting the context of knowing how many people over 60 aren't driving anymore would help.
Right, but we're not gonna be able to gather that information.
Well, but they are. So I'm just saying, if
Oh,
they,
yeah, that,
if they accepted that question, it's something that might help us as well.
Oh, to bring to us as information to share.
Exactly,
Got it,
exactly.
Got it.
Okay,
Just
yeah.
input, straight input.
no, I was thinking, because this is a thing that we're gonna be asking other communities.
I
That'd be-
understand, but.
That'd be great for us to have, yes.
Exactly, just help for the context. If they accepted, I gave them quite a few things to think about. You know me, never quiet. Okay.
Maybe other centers have done a survey like that and have asked folks if they do still drive too. I mean, it's not really outlandish.
Is that
If
part of
someone's
the
done-
town census?
No.
Or like other towns, have they sent out surveys asking that same question? Would they have that data in their own towns on how many seniors don't
You should
drive?
ask UMass too, they may have some information on this.
UMass.
So when the town sends out its annual census for who has dogs,
On statistics. on
you could ask
dogs.
them what are
But
Drive, yeah, you can probably know if they have cars.
I would add that question. It wouldn't hurt to ask, find out if some places have that.
The senior center, if they know who drives, or in the
Yeah,
community?
is there been any survey or whatever that, or any information you might have on how many seniors no longer drive? No matter where
Wherever
they
they
get
get
it
it,
from, yeah, Board of Health or wherever they might get the information. Do we ask it? Do you use public transportation? Well, that depends on whether there's any public transportation to use.
11 is public regional.
Yeah, public transit, because we had talked about that, a regional, that makes a difference. Another area that comes to mind, I'm not gonna go into it now, but it was kind of like, to make the case, to me, part of making the case is gonna be not just the senior center. It's gonna be the community center aspect of it as well. And I know that we're talking about, a center that's has designated spaces, for seniors, and that's the primary focus. But I'm thinking some folks are gonna be swayed to the extent that we can say that it's gonna have other.
That community access kinds of things, you think?
Sure. Yes, yes. Yeah, just like the Pleasant Street Center, but more so.
Yeah, in the Pleasant Street Center, we occasionally have meetings there. Conceivably do more, certainly you can't do it during the
Well,
day because it's.
Talk about, and recreation could be doing it for seniors as well as non-seniors. In other words, have some things that would appeal to. Because the things gonna appeal to the young seniors are the same thing that appealed to them when they weren't, because they're still working, and it's the same kind of thing. Anyone whose kids have flown the coop or at that age where they no longer have any use for their parents. All right. Okay, the next, well, it's the finance.
So John Sasso sent us some questions. Apologies, I already consolidated.
Oh, okay.
But I think there were two core areas, is the way I viewed it, and we can show John specifically, but it's, what additional sources of revenue do you have to support town resources for programming and special activities? And then we asked for details. For example, state funds, federal funds, what are the sources? What are they? Private foundations, local fundraising efforts like dinners, special events, game nights, thrift shop sales, things like that. Nonprofit senior organizations, trust funds, private donations, other. So, they may just kind of more check off, like, oh yep, we do this, we do this. For example, Linfield told me that their thrift shop generates a ton of money. And I think I shared the example of the woman who was the cashier was bragging to the director of the Senate that she was gonna make her number for the month. And it was like, holy cow, that's awesome. But, some of these folks, we love to, and we know that, we're constrained by various things today. What we're trying to understand is if some of these constraints were lifted, what can we do? And what kind of money can we get? And that relates to what does the town need to support by itself and what's gonna come from other sources, right? So that was the additional sources. And in John's questions, he asked, the detail of where you get money, check off box. The other was elder service budget breakdown, which I think would be great. Almost be kind of cool to see what's the kind of per person budget. Might be an interesting number to have.
which is easily calculated, right? And then the other part was talking about recently renovated centers in particular, trying to understand what happened with unexpected costs. So, did you get unexpected costs? How'd you pay for them? Did you raise funds beyond what the voters supported you with? How did you raise those funds? And then the other question, which I don't remember if it was John or me who added it, but was the recently renovated centers, what would you change if you could do it again? I'm into learning.
I want to get into, because we had talked about it, and when I was coming up before, I hadn't seen John's thing, well, I didn't get home till 5:30, so I.
Yeah,
didn't have time.
I
We
just
all
got
kinda
it, I got it late, so I didn't send it out, so. I think what I could do too is compile everyone's questions, because I think programming was a little up in the air, so if everyone can kind of button up all of their questions within the next week, then I can compile the list of all, a document with all the questions on it. And then at the next meeting, maybe you all can consolidate at that time.
Or maybe we could ask everyone to do it themselves, not share it, but do it themselves, kind of
Sure.
highlight your top X questions and come into the meeting prepped with that.
One of the things on in the finance, might be useful to find out what percentage of the senior population typically uses the senior center to take.
Yeah, that's something that they should know.
We,
What was that,
for us,
Mike?
it's like 10% or something.
Can you say that again?
The percentage of the senior population that uses the center. Of the senior population in Reading is 6,000. We have 600.
Oh, it's more.
Senior population.
Oh, no, maybe not,
27% of
it's 27, yeah.
25,000, so that's from.
Marilyn has her hand up again.
Merrill? Oh, can't hear you, get off mute.
Space bar.
I can't hear you very well, but if, were you asking what percentage of the seniors use the senior center in Reading?
Yes.
Oh, well, the last report we got was that almost 2,000 year to date have used the senior center. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jenna, please, but Chris talked about it at length, and we have somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 age 60 plus, so roughly a third are using
Right,
it.
but is that unduplicated?
Yeah, I was just gonna
Yeah.
ask that.
Yes,
I don't think you're capable of doing that.
I don't remember.
we are capable of unduplicating it, and it's on every report, both duplicated and unduplicated. And my understanding was that was the unduplicated.
Across programs? Across
Yes.
programs?
Yes,
I'm going in.
The question,
All the
Chris was
Not a
really
big deal.
impressed.
But Marilyn, it's not, that it really wasn't, what are we doing? It's something that we should figure out. I remember reading those numbers, and I thought that the number you're talking about, the 2,000, was a duplicated number.
Yeah.
That was. But,
Because that
I could be
put us
wrong,
to the
I'm not-
top
So,
I don't
5 in the
think so.
state, probably.
so the
It's year
duplicate
to
number is
date.
bigger.
It's not in any one month. In any one month, I think it's
I thought it
around
was 25.
700, somewhere in there,
4,000.
Nancy.
I think it's a big
Do you
number.
remember? But year to date in total, I believe it was the unduplicated. Jenna, you must have access to the report. It was running around 12 to 1,500, I think, and now it has gone up substantially. Chris was really
But
knocked off his
the other thing
socks.
about that,
the question that I wonder is, do we really have the breakdown between how many people are there or how many people from Reading are there? Because like for the bridge group, for example, there's 16 to 20 people there, 2/3 of them are from Reading.
Yeah, I think he
So
said
is that true with Zoom or is that true with the other stuff? I don't know. I'd like to know how the figures were defined.
Unduplicated is 585 for July, and duplicated is 3,000.
Right, but the year to date, Jenna, that was the number. not the month, the year to date.
But the year to date, each month should not vary by more than like,
Well,
you
maybe
know,
it does.
30 to 50.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't
Doesn't
mean this
matter.
discussion, I didn't mean that.
Yeah. I can send you guys those statistics too when I send out the report.
That'd be good.
But you know,
And
the-
I think that John Parsons' question is that it does not exclude ones from other communities, to my knowledge. But we also don't know how many of our folks are going to other communities, so it's kind of a wash. But anyway, but it's a high number. It's way over 10%.
So John, when you go into Bridge, do you check in?
Yes, we do.
So that number's there then.
No, I know the number's there, but what our question is whether it tells what town they came from, or whether they came from
It's in the
Reading.
profile where they're from.
And when people go in for social services, the other stuff that takes place there, does that get recorded too?
Yes.
I mean, that's,
Yeah.
those are important.
Yep.
Thank
So right now for the month of July, we have 115 people that came in or called or anything like that. They tracked the phone calls as well in social services, and 272 was the duplicated
That's
amount of calls, yep. The other thing too that I've,
But is that by
But I-
age? Is that broken down by age? Because since they see people of all ages.
I assume that would be clients, but again, I can check with Chris. I know the other thing that I've heard too is the fact that, you know, we have the ARPA funds now, so a lot of our programming is free, so that could impact our numbers as well. So I think getting the data from other communities is super helpful to see what that percentage is, cause yeah, our percentage is this. And it could stay the same if we start to charge for a lot of our programs again, and hopefully we can,
And we need to know how many are phone calls and how many are people actually on site.
yeah, so the girls, Elise and Carrie track the calls. Every time someone calls or anytime someone comes in, there's a detail on if it was a phone call, if it was an in-person walk-in. They track it in my senior center.
We're back. And just to note,
Jenna, I'm sorry. Jenna, I've got the report from June, and it's showing the unduplicated total served year to date, not just the month, but year to date, was
That's from June.
25,385. Unduplicated, it was 1,925.
Okay,
That's
so
year to date.
1,000
It's not just the 1 month. That's just somewhere in the community, there's 1,925 different people who at some point in the first 6 months of the year use the senior center is what that means. So it's way
Great,
up there.
thanks. Yeah, great.
I knew I printed those reports for a reason.
just to note that as a follow-up before we go on, that everybody's being asked when they get the composite list of questions. First of all, time to get any other questions in within the next week.
That'd be great.
And then to Mark's point, then to everybody to list, right, what's important, what you think are the ones, the must ask, the prioritization of the questions. Okay.
And if you can't do all of them, maybe kind of say 10, 12, whatever. What are they in total across?
Right, I don't want to be, right, I don't want to say a number like that before we see what we have. In other words, because then it may be, geez, it's the 13th one and we're fighting over a 12.
I'd like to be in that position.
Okay. Yeah, well, we already have, what, like 13, because 11 plus another couple of questions on transportation alone? Okay. Can I keep this?
It's interesting, because some of those questions, the answer's gonna come out of the conversation. He has one opening question, you're gonna get a dump of
Right.
stuff, right? And then if they don't,
That's, I think, exactly what we want.
Okay,
Can I jump in?
Yes,
I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm actually back home now in front of my computer. Sorry. Just real quick, first of all, I do apologize. I did send those questions out late. There was a set of questions also, Mark, on that list about getting feedback from the different centers in terms of what they charge or
Yeah.
if they charge to the centers, for the users. I think that's another important one. I do
that's
agree
on
with-
Mark's list.
Okay, I do agree with John's point that it's great to have this, even if it's just a guide. But my perspective is as best as we can, try to make these checkoff boxes or things of that nature where we can get some data, and then also have the conversations to pull out other tidbits that might, add to the information that we're trying to grasp. I do think I think it might be worthwhile to keep them, separate topics on the survey as well, so people understand, okay, what we're looking to try to pull out of each of the areas. So I think that's another piece. And I wasn't obviously able to see all the stuff that was done. I know that Jenna sent out the questions on transport, but yeah, I would say if we can try to keep it as tight as possible, and then use that as a guide to the communication, I think that would be very helpful. I did want to real quick circle back just for a minute. I apologize. I obviously was not really able to jump back in on the conversation about some of the programming pieces. And I just had one comment to say. I think Mark asked the question, and he's absolutely right. Where are the holes? What are the things that people are going to be asking about? And I have to say, in all of the conversations I've had, either with neighbors or town meeting members, the thing that keeps coming, like people keep coming back to me about, is data. How many people are using the center? How many people will the programs really drag in? I still think that's something that, and we tried in the last go round where we were helping the other architects flush out the other center, come up with, well, we think this is a room of this size and it can handle this many people. I think that's the piece that is a whole still, and having the information that you guys are talking about in terms of the data that you are collecting today is certainly a huge help in that. I think to me that's a big programming piece that people have asked me about consistently. Will drive a lot of the questions about what sort of space do we really need, and obviously into the cost side. So I just wanted to circle back on that, because I thought that was a really important point, because I do know it's one of the consistent questions I get all the time.
And at some level, that there's some percentage of the population of the senior center that's getting their socialization elsewhere, whether it's the Y, whether it's whatever they're doing, their neighborhood network is good enough. I don't know whether you can find that out in towns, whether they have significant resources that change a need for a senior center.
So we're gonna figure out how to kind of turn that into a question.
I'm sorry, Mark.
I think that also in the finance piece, or maybe in the programming piece, if we can ask if folks have any type of scholarships for their seniors who are low income or anything like that, in recreation, and even in the schools, they have a form that you can fill out. So if you're low income, how do you offset someone who needs help? They want to come to Zumba, but they can't pay $5 to come to Zumba every week.
Right.
So I'd be interested to know if they have any type of scholarship fund or something like that.
How's the town able to collect money? How's the rec do it today for programming?
We use a system called MyRec.
Yeah.
So it's an online management system, so we funnel all of our payments through that.
And goes into a bank account that the town owns?
We do a deposit through there, we print out a report, and then our executive assistant inputs it into Munis, the deposit, and then it goes into the bank.
So that's for payment.
Yep.
But that account can't be used for donations or anything else as well too.
So it depends on how much the donation is. So if it's just a nominal donation of like $25 and so passed away and they would like it to go to the senior center.
Okay.
We can put that as a vending item, and we actually have been doing that as of late into MyRec for the seniors. So we've been taking ATS payments as well as the co-pays for ATS and the co-pays for Lifeline through MyRec now. And just depositing them into the Elder Services account.
cool, right.
To kind of streamline it, because there's a bunch of different people involved in the town hall. So definitely if Elder Services used Senior Center, My Senior Center, they have an option to use that and go through the online management system, so folks don't have to pay cash moving forward. And then, they also have the ability to just hop on our platform of MyRec, which would save the town money. So that's what Lexington does, they're all on MyRec, Elder Services and Rec.
Nancy?
You're asking a lot of good questions about stats and data, information that we need to support this effort as we go forward. And it would be interesting if this group could generate those questions so that Elder Services, who is collecting all kinds of data, can format it into a report that meets the needs of the Recalc group and what it feels it needs in order to support questions in the community. So it would be great if this group could gen up, just like you're doing for your different work groups, gen up a list of questions that you feel that people are going to ask you that you are going to need the answers to. And I think Elder Services can start collecting that data for you, if it isn't already. That's just a suggestion. That's all.
I think it's a good suggestion. So we will, I think at the same time, at the next meeting that we're prioritizing, we could think in terms of questions that would be appropriate, that could be more than what we're gonna be doing with other senior centers. In other words, some of the questions we may say, well, it's not, that's too detailed or whatever, but that might be great to have for our own, presentation to the town, the report that we'll eventually make for town meeting.
I think it would be very helpful. You just need to tell Elder Services, what are the questions? That's all. That's it.
Okay, the one thing that I think we did the next steps basically. We have to have questions before then we get to that, the item number 5 on how we actually going forth or getting that information. And is that where people feel, is that the same case? Or in other words, when I see that, we're going to gather the information, in other words, next steps as far as going out. We're not going to be breaking it up or assigning people to places because we don't have the master list yet.
Not yet.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
But that's all.
So in other words, for next agenda.
Yes.
So one of the things is to kind of come in with your prioritized list. Our goal is going to be to consolidate the prioritized list. Maybe that's another agenda item, is to say, okay, how are we going to go out?
Right. Or will we have any information about a possible intern or anything at that?
I don't know if there's any plan.
We had talked about it. I didn't know who was reaching out on
Was it
that.
a volunteer kind of person, right?
I think it should be someone on the group or a staff member, because we actually are well informed enough to ask those follow-up questions, and maybe a volunteer wouldn't really know what to ask.
Or are you thinking they could coordinate, once we've asked the questions and have kind of data, they can go?
No, I think it would have been easier to have somebody that's just gonna be spending, 20 hours a week or whatever, just,
Doing it.
yeah, doing it.
I don't know that we have that.
Because what we assigned, I think 23, we wound up, what, 14 or 15?
So,
How many centers do we want to go
Right, is it the same ones that we?
So I think we should make that an agenda item for next meeting.
Can I make one other suggestion?
Peer communities,
Yes,
that would
John.
narrow it down. Peer communities.
Could we, I think this would be interesting, just as we were talking, I was thinking, we should answer those questions for ourselves first, for what Reading does. Just so we have baseline data for where we think we are with regards to those particular questions. I think that would be an interesting thing to do. When we did the questions in the survey the last time, that was one of the things I found myself trying to pull together at the end of it. When I was doing the comparisons, I didn't have all the answers to the Reading data to start. So I think if, number one, we get that list of questions finalized. Number two, we should try to get answers put in place for our own data, just so we know as a baseline.
Yep, good idea, Joe. We do have another item that we need to select the person to represent Recalc for the committee that's making the recommendation to.
Selection.
Yeah, selection.
So we gotta put that on the next agenda too.
Or we could say, I mean, it came up. Sure, we can put it on for the next one, this time.
Source selection.
There's like one from the Council on Aging, one from Recalc, one from, I think is the Building Committee, I mean, there's,
City Select Board.
yeah, there's 7.
Yeah,
It's right there.
in here.
Proposal evaluation.
Yes.
Director of Facilities, Community Services Director, Town Manager, Select Board Member, Recalc Member, COA Member, Permanent Building Committee Member. So 7. 7 is the magic number, it seems.
So have that.
What is this for? I apologize. What was it for?
So John, when the RFP responses come back, we need a selection committee to evaluate them.
Oh,
And
okay.
select who it's gonna be.
I'll
So there's
select
7
a
members.
recommendation to the select board. I thought it was, is it to select or make a recommendation to the? select board?
Technically, I think you're right. It's a
No, I just-
recommendation to the select board. Just says it make it a selection committee, people ranking proposals. There's a whole criteria for doing that. I think you're actually right, though. I think that the owner responses, okay, here's the process. Score the proposals, schedule interviews, final rankings, list of ranked finalists to the procurement officer and town manager, submit a list accompanied by written explanation. Procurement officer, town manager will commence fee negotiations if the owners have negotiated. So no, select board's not even gonna be involved in this
Okay.
committee.
So this is an important committee. And we'll have one representative, so have in mind if you were interested, let the committee know next time. Any other business before we schedule the next meeting? Hearing none? All right, schedule it for the next meeting. That is already within a week. If you have any additional questions, sure. So anytime after. And then it'll go out to everybody, Jenna, once you have that master list.
Definitely.
So 2 to 3 weeks out. Would 3 be better? I'm looking at people to see, or I don't know what people's schedules are like.
Are we on Wednesdays now?
That's what we've been doing, yes.
So, might wanna do the 27th. The 20th, there is a financial forum.
Okay.
The 13th, I personally have a commitment. That's probably too soon.
Yes.
So maybe the 27th is a good date?
Okay. 27th?
I'll be hiking in England.
Cool.
Would be Zoom,
Yeah, Saffron.
Huh?
Saffron?
I mean, you know, I could be in a beautiful B and B with Wi-Fi, I don't know where else.
So
What- but
just
why
to think
don't
you're
you-
5 hours ahead of us,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So.
If you'd be willing, like, to then, you know, after you get the questions, to prioritize?
Yep.
Do that.
I get it all done before.
Could we do 7 o'clock on, and I have a commitment from 6 to 7, and I can start you over here.
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
I'll really miss.
You will be missed, but certainly the rankings of questions, you could certainly share in advance, that'd be cool, so just with Jenna, yeah.
And I've been on many source selection committees
Oh,
in New York, but it's not a fun thing to do, so.
It's an important
It's a fun, it's very important job.
Warning us.
Right.
But this also, though, is it, people, area of expertise. It's not that anyone couldn't, but if somebody has a particular expertise or interest, you know, that would be, I know I don't, so I'm not putting myself forward, so it's definitely open.
I have no expertise in that.
I think it's, looking at the evaluation criteria is really what it's all about,
Yeah.
and getting a feel for people, right, and what they're doing with all of them, can we work with them?
Probably done at least 1,000 interviews, so. That I.
If you want to be able to regional people, this guy cannot win, I don't care. How low he been.
have we selected, like, we ever had a preferred group, not a preferred group, but a group that we're familiar with, that we've worked with a few times in town?
So, careful,
I'm just, not preferred, but,
Performance.
Yes.
Vendor that you,
we, so it's an open,
yeah, I get the RFP, I
Request.
get it.
Yep. and it must be that way.
Sure.
And have to evaluate the selection committee to use those criteria.
But the good news is it doesn't have to be the lowest.
In this case, it doesn't, it needs to, it's a preferred, you select a preferred vendor, see if you can negotiate terms with them, and if successful, off we go, and if not successful, then we go.
So it'd be ranked. Unless people felt that the next, there was such a big gap that the, yeah. Okay.
And hopefully we get enough responses that there's some choices, and it sounds like there can be.
Well, it takes one good.
Yeah, it was always great to have choice, yeah, choice is always good.
Too much choice. Okay, so we get the next meeting scheduled, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay, so that's John Sasso.
So you need a second first.
Second, okay.
Who, John Parsons, is it?
I think two of us said so moved at the same time.
Same time.
Okay, John Parsons, okay.
And a second,
Mike seconds the motion to adjourn.
So discussion. John Sasso.
3.
Yes.
Laura?
yes.
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
yes.
John. Okay.
Margaret,
Go on.
before you got here,
Bye, everyone.
I'm not playing